Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is the meeting of the Executive of City of York Council, and it's Thursday, the 14th of September. So as a starting point on the agenda, our first item would be apologies, and we've had apologies from Councillor Kate Revilius, and that's based on the job share that she has with Councillor Kent. So it's not really an apologies, it's just that they're job sharing. So one comes one month and one comes the other month. Our second item is declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declarations of interest? No. Okay, we have no declarations of interest in the room. Thank you for that, everybody. Secondly, next on the agenda is the minutes. Does anybody have any comments about the minutes? No. Okay, so can we approve those as an accurate representation of the meeting then, please? Thank you. Yeah, so those are approved. And then to follow, we have public participation. And so everybody who speaks will get 3 minutes and will be given a 30-second indication if I feel that it's the appropriate thing to do. And we have 4 speakers this evening and 2 of them are on Zoom. Our first speaker is Gwen Swinburne. Gwen, would you like to come to the table? And Gwen's going to speak on the remit of the committee, governance issues, including consultation protocols and key decisions. Thanks, Gwen.
Some of them fell off the end. I'm sorry. I will send you this. It's governance generally. Thank you, Leader. A number of governance issues, bits I'm afraid. In your last meeting, the forward plan you discussed never appeared. Still hasn't. So this time, the so-called forward plan arrived yesterday. It has now shrunk to a 1-month plan with just 5 items comprising 3 columns. This completely subverts the purpose of forward plans, a problem you inherited. May I ask you adopt the excellent practice from North Yorkshire Council, who have an informative and fit for purpose forward plan until March 2024. Many items and 10 columns of detail, including key decision protocols. On another inherited problem, on the electronic agenda, please will you require that all report annexes are fully named with no acronyms, no more anonymous Annex 1, which is lost in cyberspace after the meeting. Management will be very well aware that unless labelled and linked to the report, these are impossible to find on the web. Regarding your new equalities impact assessment form, please consider adding an additional category, a spatial target as follows. The impact on our 6 most deprived lower super output levels areas, which are in the bottom 20% deprivation areas in England. It's an easy one, and I think it'll be great. The improved report format and links in the council plan report are excellent. However, it should be made clearer that there was no external consultation. As in my previous remark, it would be great to have seen at least one spatial target in that council plan, the lower super output areas at least again. Now the plan is agreed, will you please make sure management now record, publish, adjust with version control, all the strategies, policies, plans that feed into that. We've never been able to even find them. You saw what happened with the transport plan. Finally, Chair, on the award scheme, I agree with everything you have done to target the fund and reallocating the rest. I think it's great. I do think there's a problem with the allocations that have then been made. I think there's a mathematical problem going on there. So it'd be nice if you could publish the workings, and that would get rid of that. The executive would have been the meeting to regularise the mishandled ward budget.
Apologies, 15 seconds.
Okay, the executive would have been the meeting to regularise the mishandled ward budget component from the last council meeting. I do think that was a error from the monitoring officer. Thank you.
Thank you for those, and we'll certainly consider and look into your comments. Thanks very much. Thank you. Our next speaker is on Zoom, and that is Flick Williams, and she's going to speak to us about the remit of the committee, questions in advance of the transport strategy consultation in respect of the Zebra funded new buses and decision on Haxby Station. Flick, can you hear me?
I can. Good afternoon.
Hi. So you have 3 minutes, and I think last time you spoke, you requested not to get a 30-second notice. Would you prefer I didn't give you one?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Elected members, a question. How do you think we have a built environment and transport infrastructure that is so inaccessible to disabled and older people? How have we ended up with 53 new electric buses that have not only failed to improve accessibility features, they are worse than the existing EVs serving the park and rides? Some answers. First, the people making the decisions are unaffected by them. They have no skin in the game. Societal barriers prevent most disabled people from progressing to a position where they become the decision makers and the status quo continues. We'll do it next time. These buses have a lifetime of 15 years, and I shall most certainly be dead by then. Many disabled people have life-limiting conditions, and it's why we get so frustrated by the perpetual promises of jam tomorrow. I know a young engaged couple, both wheelchair users, campaigning for the right to travel together. She sadly died last year. A woman replied to me, "My sister and I are both wheelchair users. If we want to go into town together, one has to go on an hour ahead and wait in a coffee shop." Another, "I know a mother and son who have the same condition and both use wheelchairs. They're unable to travel at all as he is too young to travel alone." Second, we were not listened to. The Bus Forum and YDRF raised access before the buses were even ordered. Assurances given us along the way have proved false. Manchester and Liverpool listened. All their new buses have 2 wheelchair spaces with backrests. And since many have complained about the pole placement on the new buses, making it even harder for wheelchair users to get in and out of the space, the officer response is how many people are affected. This goes right to the heart of the problem in this authority. Equalities is not a numbers game. Nowhere in the public sector equality duty does it say you can treat disabled people less favourably if it only harms a few. The press comments section in response to the article where I raised these issues was so filled with vitriol towards me personally and disabled people in general, they deleted it in its entirety in under 2 hours. Little wonder then that the vast majority of disabled people suffer in silence, afraid to speak out and engage. Perhaps most worrying was the comment from someone who said they were a bus driver and got sick of disabled people moaning about being left at the bus stop. That tells me bus driver training is not what the operators crack it up to be. But also every disabled person who read it, now going to catch a bus, will be wondering, will the driver today be the one who dislikes disabled people? And sadly, the decision to build Haxby Station with no guarantee of level boarding in an unstaffed station will be yet more of the same exclusion. Exclusion is discrimination. Thank you.
Thank you for your speech and issues that you've raised with us, Flick. I think that Councillor Corbane could write to you on those particular issues, and also I'd like to have the opportunity to outline to you as well what we are trying to do within council around improving our performance around equalities and human rights as well. It's a keystone of our council plan for the next 4 years. Thank you for your comments. Our next speaker is Councillor Hollier, and he's joining us via Zoom, and he wants to speak on item 8, finance and performance. Councillor Hollier, can you hear me?
I can. Good afternoon.
Okay, so you've got 3 minutes, and I'll give you a 30-second warning, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right, off you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking this evening about the cuts to the ward budgets and 2 serious issues that I've been raising privately without a resolution or indeed much by way of an acknowledgement of the problem for the past 2 months. Firstly, the glaring error in the formula. Ward budgets as they stand are made up of 2 elements. The first element allocated by the number of councillors, this is fine, and the second element based on the index of multiple deprivation. However, this second element does not take account of the population of the ward. For example, Bishopthorpe Ward has about 4,000 residents and Haxby and Wigginton has about 12,000. Bishopthorpe has an average IMD score of 5.87 and Haxby and Wigginton has an average of 5.25. This has resulted in Bishopthorpe receiving an allocation of about £4,000 and Haxby and Wigginton about £3,500 from the overall pot of £145,000, despite Haxby and Wigginton having 3 times the population. This makes no sense and means that claims that funding is targeted at more deprived wards are simply not true. Bishopthorpe, as the 15th most deprived of our 21 wards, receives the 5th highest funding per resident, about £1.49 each, compared to Haxby and Wigginton's 86p per resident, despite near identical scores. This does not just affect my ward. For example, Westfield Ward would be about £4,000 a year better off without this error, and wards like Guildhall, Micklegate, Huntington and New Earswick, Holgate and Heworth would be about £1,500 to £2,000 a year better off. Given the impact fixing this would have on the smaller wards, the only way I can see to fix this is to increase the overall funding so that they do not have the rug pulled out from them further. The second issue is in terms of the manner in which the decision was made. At full council, we were presented alongside the exec members' reports with an Annex A, a list of changes to the previously agreed budget, and an Annex B, a narrative on the way that ward funding allocations would be amended. This was named Annex B in the contents of the report, in the online agenda, in the officer decision notice, and in various other places. The motion was moved, voted on and approved, specifically only mentioned Annex A. It was surprising then to see the officer decision bringing the changes toward funding into effect, claiming that this had been approved by full council. When this was pointed out, the names of the annexes were changed after the meeting to remove reference to Annex A or Annex B. Nonetheless, they were not there at the time of the decision, and so it is clear that the changes to the formula were not approved by full council, and so should not have been made by an officer decision. The alternative is that the changes to the budget were not approved. It must be one or the other. This just
Holly, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. This just, however, give an opportunity to quash that decision and remake it publicly without the error in the formula and without the cuts that break your pre-election promises of more of the same on ward funding. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Our next speaker is Denise Craghill, who is joining us in person. Hello, Denise. Thank you. Take a seat. So, as you know, you have 3 minutes and I'll give you 30-second warning. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. York is lucky so far not to be one of the councils that is actually going bankrupt, but the lack of sufficient government funding is certainly very serious. This puts the potential £1 million or more that could be raised through charging for green bin collections fairly centre stage as additional income that could be used for supporting York residents in need. The Green Group were unable to persuade our Lib Dem colleagues to take up this option earlier in the year, but I hope you will now take a bold, evidence-based and policy-led decision on this issue. Recycling garden waste into municipal compost, which can be used by residents in their gardens, which we currently do in York, is indeed a good thing. But as the paper says, this proposed charge is in place already throughout North Yorkshire, and experience shows that charging at this level, less than £1 a week, still in fact retains significant levels of take-up. There are also some residents, particularly in the more central wards of the city, who currently have gardens but no green bin service. Many of those I've spoken to recently would be willing to pay if included in new collection rounds. And I'd ask the executive members to look very seriously at that option if you do this. There will be some real issues to address, but I'd like to suggest that this is also an opportunity to improve waste minimisation services. Support for home composting should be very proactive, taking a reasonable proportion of first year savings to fund free compost bins and a small proportion of saving to fund ongoing advice and education on composting techniques, gardening for nature and waste minimisation, a capacity the council has lost over the years. There could also be some community or sharing provision for those on low incomes and with small gardens. We will certainly support you on this, but particularly if you also take into the account the opportunities for service improvement. Finally, if I have time, a couple of questions on a different topic for Councillor Pavlovic. The all-age commissioning strategy makes reference to supported housing provision for people with multiple complex needs and the urgent need for York to have more of this. A large number of people, professionals, academics and experts by experience, put a lot of work into this and linked issues over the last 18 months. What assurance can he give it will be taken off hold?
Denise, you have
progressed-
30 seconds.
Thank
Okay,
you,
thank
and
you.
progressed as quickly as possible. And secondly, agenda item 9 refers to the additional capital spending in the housing revenue account due to increased depreciation. Extra spend is of course very welcome, but all HRA funding comes from tenants' rents. So can he explain where this extra funding is coming from and how it will impact on daily repairs, maintenance and tenant support services?
Thank
I'd
you.
really
That's 3
appreciate
minutes.
answers to that. Thank you
Okay,
very
thank
much.
you. And I'm sure Councillor Pavlovic will respond to you in writing, if that's okay. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. So we are moving on to the forward plan now, which is on page. Am I missing something? Oh, okay, thank you. Is in the agenda supplement. And so does anybody have any questions about that at all? Or any comments? Okay, our plan is to get the agenda, the forward plan, I think, presented more clearly to the public. So I think we need to do a bit of work at looking at that. So we will take that one up. But I am very glad to say that the papers that are coming through from the new administration are starting to appear on there, which is a very welcome occurrence. So we're very excited about it as well. So I'm quite happy to show you as much of the forward plan as you want to see. Right, next item, approval of the council plan. So this is another great milestone for our administration, and I'm really, really pleased to be able to bring this to you today. I hope that some of you have had a chance to have a look at it. It really is, as we say, it's one city for all is the title, and it's the council plan for the cycle 2023 to 2027. And so we are going to start off with an introduction by Ian Floyd, and then I will speak to it afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This report sets out the proposed council plan, and the executive are being asked to endorse it and then recommend it on to full council for approval. Firstly, I'd just like to thank all of those people involved in the production, and in particular, I'd just like to thank Claire Fowle, who is sat in the gallery there, for her work in terms of just bringing this all together. Clearly, if approved by full council, the plan becomes a key document in setting out the council's priorities and key commitments. The plan is very important in terms of guiding how we allocate resources within the council, and in particular, how we allocate staff and resources throughout. Whilst obviously it sets out a range of ambition, we know the council is operating within very difficult financial climate that is affecting the vast majority of local authorities, and which we are covering separately tonight. So therefore, delivery of the plan will require some difficult choices to be made, significant prioritisation of scarce resources, and will also require the council to seek to attract other funding sources and explore further opportunities for partnership working. Members of the executive, I'm sure, want to talk about their particular priorities, so I will stop here and let executive members have their say.
Thank you, Ian. That's really helpful. So I hope people don't mind if I take the chair's prerogative to speak first on this. So as leader of the council and the Labour councillors, this is a really proud moment for me. And for those who are in the room who perhaps don't know what a council plan is or haven't come across one before, it's where we take the administration's election pledges and our priorities and bring them together with council policies and also officer priorities for the broader city into a plan that the full council, that's officers and members of executive, will work together to deliver on for the city over the next 4 years. So it really is a collaboration and a very effective partnership between our senior officers and executive members. And I have to say, of course, as Ian pointed out, Claire Fall has put an immense amount of work into this. We gave her our documents, which I think were quite good as they go, but it still is a huge amount of work. So thank you to everybody who's been involved in putting this together. And so it's all focused on delivering in a meaningful and visible way for the people of York over the next 4 years. And the plan shows our vision to deliver a fairer, healthier, more accessible and sustainable city where everyone feels valued. In partnership with our great city, the expertise and will to drive us forward from businesses, civic society, world-leading educational institutions, and our amazing local communities. We'll be working across our regions also with partners to deliver on the promise of the combined authority, and that is mentioned in the council plan, and devolved decision making across York and North Yorkshire, and with our very willing partners in West Yorkshire, South Yorkshire and East Yorkshire in the Humber. This partnership working is tremendously important because, as Ian pointed out, with dwindling local authority budgets, it's more and more important that we take advantage of both expertise plus the ability to bring in money from other sources and work with our partners in a broader sense. And we will be doing an awful lot of that in a way that I think people of York won't have seen the local authority do before. So the basis of our plan is Claire was fantastic in helping us to develop the EACH acronym, which really looks at all of our major priorities that feed through everything that we're going to do through our plan. So that's equalities and human rights, putting it back at the top of the agenda in York, where it has been ignored in many areas for 8 years. And we've seen the detrimental impact that that has had on our communities and certain groups of people in our city. And we've put it back at the top of the list again so that we can reverse the ban on access to the city centre for blue badge holders. And we'll be considering that and all of the information that comes to us around it soon through executive, so that everybody can fully participate in the life of our great city. Affordability is tackling the cost of living crisis. And that's where we're going to deliver our pledge on 100% affordable housing on council-owned land. And I have noticed that there's been Liberal Democrat comment that we've dumped all of our priorities, but I had another look through the council plan and I can see every one of them in there if you actually take the time to read the document. We'll be investing, improving the damp and mould existing in the council's housing estate. We'll be retrofitting and improving insulation as we go, all with the aim of making our estate more comfortable, warmer, easier to heat, therefore driving down people's bills. We're very committed to that. Climate and environment and the climate emergency is where the sea comes from. We'll be reducing carbon as a matter of course through everything that we do in the council, and that's housing, buildings and transport are particular focus areas. These are the largest emissions in York. We'll be developing the green skills of the future in our people in the construction and retrofit industries through our green construction skills village that I envisaged being one green skills village when I started out talking to the community and various partners across the region and our city about this, but I could foresee that we will have a whole network of green skills villages, which is really fantastic. I can't wait for that. We're going to be tackling the system problems with our bus network and over reliance on some of our operators, and delivering fair concessions for young people, creating the bus system users of the future and driving down our emissions at the same time. We're going to be building houses to high energy efficiency standards, driving down the cost of passive house, making it more affordable for us to build more of our affordable housing to that standard, and delivering quality with our housing development programme. And then finally, the H in each is for health. And we are absolutely determined to improve the health and well-being for all residents across our city and reduce the health inequalities that exist in York. And 10-year mortality gap for men between our poorest and most affluent areas, and 8 years for women. And to me, this is simply unacceptable that it depends where you live in York and what your postcode is as to how long you live. We are determined to reduce that, and many of the issues that I've already raised that we're going to tackle in the areas above help to improve health. There will always also be a laser-like focus to deliver on improving the customer experience of interactions across council services. So whoever you are in our city, that's our tenants, businesses, council taxpayers, people that access our adult social care or children's services, we are absolutely determined that we are going to see that improve. And we've already started on that train of speaking to officers so that they understand what we mean by that, and that we can all work with a co-produced custom strategy towards that aim. It won't be a quick turnaround, but we're all committed to that, so we're getting on with it. We are ambitious for our city, but we also must recognise and deal with the financial situation we find ourselves in after 13 years of dwindling local government budgets and repeatedly delving into one-off reserves. Once reserves are gone, they are gone. Spending in this way is not sustainable and cannot continue, no matter what our opposition colleagues think or say. We are determined to tackle this issue. I think our residents, businesses and other organisations are seeing and will continue to see a new, a different way of doing business from the City of York Council. We still have areas to improve on, but we are determined to make an improvement. We're engaged, we're listening, we're ambitious, we're determined, and we're financially responsible, valuing and delivering for everyone and taking our city onwards and upwards into the 21st century. Right, that's me. I will open it up for anybody else that wants to say anything now. So would anybody else like to speak or make comment? Councillor Eyre?
Well, surprised you to say I'm slightly less positive than that speech, but it was very interesting. Yeah, I think so. Your manifesto, as you state, was quite unequivocal, and it's interesting that you say it's in here. The unequivocalness is the bit that's not in here, and the language is very much toned down, which is the nuance. We've been waiting for quite some time to see how that manifesto would actually translate into a detailed plan. And I think what we've discovered is that you found that it's much easier to write slogans than it is to actually deliver. If you look at those key pledges, which you say are in there, 100% affordable on council land, you're struggling to deliver that on your own Labour Party land, so it's unsurprising that you're struggling to do it on council taxpayers' land. Perhaps that's why that distinct pledge is actually not in here. The word is explore options. Neighbourhood caretakers, the promise was to look after all our communities. Again, there is no mention of how all our communities will be looked after, just proposals about how you'll influence and look at neighbourhood plans. The promise was to insulate 1,000 homes. There is no pledge in here to deliver 1,000 homes. Instead, there's a one-stop shop for residents so they can help themselves. Well-paid jobs, another pledge. Again, here you're placing all your eggs in the devolution basket, the York Central basket, and there is no short-term plan in the next 2 to 3 years about how those jobs will be delivered. Then, of course, we have the headline pledge, which featured most prominently throughout the entire election. Free school meals for every primary school child. People didn't vote for, as your plan says, to start a journey or to explore the benefits. They expect you to deliver your promise within 4 years, not explore the benefits within 10. What hope do the people have that you will deliver on that particular pledge? From the strategy launch, we learned that we have 2 hopes. We have Councillor Bob Hope and we have Councillor No Hope. Unfortunately, Councillor Douglas, primary school children cannot eat hope.
Councillor Eyre, do you think that's appropriate to call me Councillor No Hope?
You said there was no hope. That was a quote from your.
I'm sorry, I find
quote
that
from the press.
offensive. I think that is rude. Please refrain from using terms like that.
Finished.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre. Councillor Lomas.
Thank you. I found it curious you didn't mention our number one manifesto pledge, which was reversing your blue badge ban that prevented people, disabled people from our city from accessing the city centre, which I think, as Councillor Douglas mentioned in her speech, will be one of the first things we'll actually achieve. And I'll look forward to listening to what you have to say about that when it comes to executive for us to discuss the detail of it. And Councillor Eyre, I know you were a bit thrown at the end there by a rightful challenge to your language, choice of language and choice to attack an individual rather than to talk about the issues that we're facing. And I really hope you'll go away and reflect on that, because our way of doing things is about valuing people and valuing their contribution, even if we disagree with it. And so I don't think you'll find any of us using offensive terms to describe you. So I'll leave that with you to reflect on later.
Thank you, Councillor Lomas. Councillor Pavlovic.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep my bits specific to the affordable housing. There will be a paper coming through to decision session and to executive very shortly, which is the right way to do it, which will demonstrate that, yes, we will be delivering 100% affordable housing, and we'll show you which sites they're going to be on, and they're going to be delivering more affordable housing than on certain sites. And I won't say which, because I don't want to give anything away, than were originally in your plans. So it won't be long now. So just keep hanging on.
Thank you, Councillor Pavlovic. Councillor Coles.
Thank you. I just wanted to just draw attention to the core commitment around health and wellbeing and the demand that we know is growing across the city, particularly around pressures around adult social care budgets, and the need, therefore, in a cost of living crisis, to ensure that we are doing the best that we can to support people with additional needs across the city and ensuring that they are getting the support they need at the right time. And that is rightly a priority of this administration. And I suppose obviously, some of that involves some integration and collaboration of services, but at the heart of it, I think I just wanted to put on the record the importance of the people who are delivering those services, who are out there in our communities, working incredibly hard with the most vulnerable people in the city, both the professionals who do that job, often for very low wages, and the unpaid carers who are out there every day looking after the most vulnerable citizens. And I think if that is the ethos of this administration, then that is a very good thing to start with and to be moving forwards on.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. Would anybody else like to speak? Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chair. On Councillor Eyre's points, I think making children's hunger into a political football is a very low bar, really. I mean, on page 44 of the report, over 6,000 children in York are living in poverty. And, you know, that's 3 times one of our large secondary schools, to put it in perspective. And I think that what we need to do is we need to work as hard as we can to do everything we can to support those young people, which is why I'm really, really happy that affordability is one of the key tenets of what we're trying to do. And I'd just like to thank the people who've already engaged with us and already been involved with us across the city in order to deliver what we can for young people. It's not going to be easy. It was never going to be easy. But that's why people across the city are coming together to try and make a difference. So I recognise that you have a lack of ambition for supporting young people, but we will do what we can. And I'm really happy that we're doing what we can. So thank you very much for this. I think it's a great start and I'm really looking forward to making the most of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. Right, I think that's everybody who wants to speak now. Councillor Pavlovic, you want to say one further
Sorry,
thing?
I forgot. I mentioned the affordable housing. You also mentioned retrofitting and insulating homes. Since May, we've already insulated over 100. There will be another 100 by the end of the financial year. So we're already starting that process, but it's from a low base and we need to do more. But I do accept that we're making the investment and we're actually delivering on it.
Thank you, Councillor Pavlovic. Excellent. Right. Can I ask everybody if you are happy to adopt the council plan so that we can move on with our pledges and get going for the city and stop arguing about it? Marvellous. Thank you. It is passed. Thanks very much, everybody. Right, our next agenda item is agenda item 6 on the document building lease for drug and alcohol service, and we have Ruth Hine who is here to introduce the report for us. So thank you, Ruth, for attending. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Good evening. So seeking approval for the building lease for the drug and alcohol service within York. Currently we use 2 buildings in the city centre. The contract for our service is due to go out for tender in the next couple of weeks. So we're seeking approval for the tender documents to give assurance that the premises will be provided for service delivery to any potential bidders. Therefore, we're asking members to consider and approve those negotiations and ensure that there is the subleases available for any potential bidders. The decisions required to enable the drug and alcohol treatment and recovery service to operate effectively from those suitable buildings, and without it, a large number of individuals' recovery would be affected. I'd just also like to add that this paper was prepared with our legal and property services.
Thank you very much, Ruth. Does anybody have any questions for Ruth at all? No. Anybody want to make any comment? Joe, Councillor Coles.
Hi, thank you for that. And I just wanted to add that despite budget pressures across the city and for us, that it's really important that vital services like this are able to continue, and that means that we need buildings to deliver them out of. This is a central location. It is known and established and known by service users and others who work and live in the area, and is therefore a very sensible choice for a building. That, as far as I understand it, that's the part of this service that will enable the tendering of the larger contract to continue later in the year. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Councillor Coles. Anybody else like to speak? Councillor Eyre?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, welcome the paper and thank officers for the work they've put into it. Fully support this and fully support the recommendations. I think I've only questions really disappointments about how the cuts elsewhere. So the £100,000 that will be cut today from substance misuse, what impact that will have on people who are using this service. And I think a question for Councillor Cole as to there appears to be a meeting scheduled in 4 weeks' time to discuss how that £100,000 will be spent, and yet the £100,000 is no longer available in the budget. So just wondered what was happening around that decision.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre. Councillor Coles, would you like to
I'll
respond?
happily come back to him on it.
Okay, we will get back to you on that question, Councillor Eyre. Right, okay. Everybody, are you happy to accept the recommendations then of the report and move forward? Yes, yeah, thank you. So those are passed. Thank you very much, Ruth. Thank you. Okay, can I just have everybody's attention for a moment? So Francis has very just kindly very quickly pointed out to me that on the previous item, on page 12 for the council plan, the recommendations and reasons, it's recommended that executive approve the council plan and that they recommend it to council to final approval on the 21st of September 2023. And so I just want to clarify that that's what we're voting on and approving. Yes, so that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you. Our next item is item 7, the all age commissioning strategy. And we have Jamila Hussain and Abid Mumtaz who are going to come and introduce the report to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the commissioning strategy. We haven't actually had a commissioning strategy in York before, and it is a requirement that any agency or organisation who commissions service has a strategy to set out the vision. The Care Act 2014 sets out that we must support our population to actually enhance our service and let our population and our providers know what the clear vision of the council is and why a strategy is so important. Hence why you've got the document in front of you. It clearly is an overarching strategy. It mirrors some of the strategies in place, and it needs further amendments in there to closely align with the council plan that has just been agreed today. I think part of some of the work that we are doing, we have worked with partners, we still commission services quite regularly. It isn't a document that will stand still. It will be reviewed regularly, and it will change as we change with the national context and the local context of delivery of service. The main priorities within the strategy sort of resonate with some things that you've said, Councillor Douglas, around we want to make it fair, accessible, we want to reduce the inequalities around the city by preventing ill health and supporting good health through prevention and early intervention. The other areas of around focused on outcomes, we can get far too bogged down in how many people use the service rather than what are the outcomes for people. And we know from some of our data, some of the outcomes for our people across the city are not equal, and some of the outcomes in particular areas and particular wards are not great. We equally want to create a vibrant market. So we know from our data that some areas across in some wards don't have the same level of accessibility and access to services that they should. Within the commissioning strategy, we lay it really clear that we do want to focus on an equitable service for all. But equally that those services are of good quality. One of the main agenda items we have is around safeguarding. Are our services safe, effective and caring? And do they support the needs and wishes of people? And through our carer survey and our survey of people who use our services, it came out really loud and clear around what their expectations are, which we've captured in the strategy through our co-production. But we move forward then on co-production, we're redesigning some of the services that we put in place. But equally, the commissioning strategy talks about how can we support people on strength-based, creating that resilience in people. We know from the health and wellbeing plan that a lot of deterioration health can be prevented through the right supportive care. And we need to start working with our community to say, how can we build resilience in communities? How can we use more digitalisation rather than focusing on crisis care? And another area of, and I think it's mentioned quite a few times already, is around housing and supporting people to live in the most appropriate housing with the right support. Really pleased about the damp and mold, which can affect our population, particularly older people, people with COPD, and the great strides that's already been mentioned about tackling that as we go into winter. Equally within the commissioning strategy is that vision that we actually support people to maintain good health. And I wanted to finish on one of the priorities is value for money. Some people always think that value for money is that we are going to cut services and that's how we're going to save. Absolutely not. I think this strategy clearly outlines that this is not about cutting services. This is about the council's vision, about supporting people, maintaining independence, maintaining good health, reducing deterioration when we can see by working really closely with our health colleagues. And we know our population now. We have really good data through the Frailty Hub. Social care are working with help to really identify those individuals that need support. And when I talk about care and support, it's not always necessary to actually procure a service. So the strategy isn't aimed totally at providers who we purchase care from. It's to all people who use our service, carers and families, of how can we start doing things in a different way, because what we've been doing in the past simply hasn't been working. And as Councillor Douglas, you say, the life expectancy is increasing, so we need to start changing, and this strategy sort of outlines what changes we need to do to support our population. We have already had some amendments from Councillor Coles, which we will add to the document. But I equally want to say, because commissioning happens quite regularly and quite quickly, we are going to review this document on a 6-monthly basis and make any changes. Hence why in one of the recommendations we've asked for delegation to Councillor Coles and myself, because we don't want it to be a document that just stands there in a shelf. We want it to be a working, deliverable document. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamila. Abid, would you like to say anything at this point? Okay, thank you for that. And personally, I'd like to thank you both and your team, Abid, for all of the work that has gone into this, because it's a huge amount of work and way overdue. If we're all honest, we should have had something like this an awful long time ago. Councillor Coles, would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you. And thank you to Abid and Jamila. I know that this has been a long time coming, and thank you for all the work that you and the team have put into it. It really is important that we are commissioning in the most effective way that we can. We know that we've got increasing demand across the city, and we know that we don't have additional money easily to pay for it all. So therefore, you know, doing this in the fairest and the most the fairest way possible across the city is obviously a sensible approach. It is disappointing that this wasn't in place before now, but I'm really grateful that it is now, along with the other items that are on the forward plan that I know are also part and parcel of, you know, building a framework and a structure to the services that you're delivering to ensure that we are delivering the best possible service we can in a fairest possible way for residents across the city. You know, in particular, I just wanted to thank you for you and all the team for everything that you have put into this, and to those who are delivering this care across the city, which I said before, but all this work is really appreciated. And I think it's really important that we take all the opportunities we can to make sure that people know that even though we know that they're under huge pressures on the front line and in their work for the local authority, that we are very grateful for everything that you're doing and the difference that it will make. It is really important. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. Anybody else like to speak, ask questions? Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, we welcome the strategy. Thank officers for the work that's gone into it over a long period of time, and also Councillor Runciman, who worked on it as well. It's been a long time coming, a lot of hard work has gone into it. I think this is absolutely vital in terms of how we approach this going forward. The strategy is quite clear: prevent, delay, reduce need, and home first. And this isn't just about saving us money. It does save us money. It is the most cost-effective way to do things, but it is also the best way to deliver services to people and delivers the best outcomes. People want intervention early as possible to maintain independence, to be able to live at home. They don't want to be in care setting. That's not what's the best for them. That should always be a last resort approach, and we need to put as much as we can into doing that. That's why it's disappointing elsewhere in the executive that this whole strategy starts to be picked apart. So you have the £100,000 cuts to early intervention in mental health and autism support. Things that I was working with Jamila on in administration to look at how we could get that early intervention and prevention, the vital nature of that work to stop costs further down the line are being cut. all the talk about community building and asset building in communities, that's precisely what ward budget does. That builds that capacity in communities to allow communities to be able to support themselves. The lunch clubs, the trips out, all of the senior citizen services that were being provided, again, they're being stripped away. This paper commits to stripping away all of that third sector support, which is absolutely, well, not all of it, a high proportion of that third sector support, which is absolutely vital to delivering all of those early intervention and prevention services. Fully agree with what the strategy says. Preventing health by working at community level. Community development is the York model for care, produces major positive impacts and improves health outcomes and reduces inequality. In fact, priority 1, focus on mental health, requires commissioning services focused on prevention. And what this paper, next paper does is cut the £100,000 it actually delivers on that priority. So I would urge executive to reconsider some of the decisions that they're taking elsewhere and actually commit to the details within the strategy.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre. Jamila, Abid, would you like to make any further comments at this point?
I think it just to the point I made about value for money, because we had one of the most expensive services recently, you know, providing a lot of service for people, and people thought because it was expensive, it was good, but actually it was one of our most, one of the services that had the least good outcomes, and it was poor quality. So sometimes it's about doing things in a different way, and it's not all about the money that's used, especially when we work in communities and we're looking at building resilience. Sometimes it's not all about, you know, pounds first, it's about bringing people with you. So I would say it's always a mixture, and high cost doesn't necessarily mean good quality.
Thank you, Jamila. Anything else that anybody would like to add? Sorry, Councillor Pavlovic.
Just to say, and you know, I commend everything in this report, and really answering the point that ex-councillor Craggill raised earlier about the importance of supported housing. We need to move away from any sense of silo working, and the housing area will very much want to work closely with you to provide that type of supported accommodation, and hopefully move some of the expensive out-of-town placements, which I know are a major issue, back into the city, back with people who can support them, as well as our statutory services. So, you know, we will work together, and we will work together as a team and as an administration.
Thank you, Councillor Pavlovic, absolutely. Right, okay, thanks everybody. So the recommendations are on page 3 of the agenda supplement that you have. So the recommendation is to approve the all-age commissioning strategy and delegate any changes to the strategy to Executive Member for Health, Wellbeing and Adult Social Care and the Corporate Director of Adult Services and Integration. The commissioning strategy formed part of the core requirements under the Care Act 2014 and the Children's Act 2004. This strategy underpins the current market position statement, as well as conforming to the expectations of the CQC assurance framework. Can I see that you're in agreement with approving that, please, everybody? Yeah, thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Abid and Jamila. Right, our next item on the agenda is item number 8, that's Finance and Performance Monitor 1. And Debbie Mitchell is going to be introducing that for us. So Debbie, thank you. Off you go.
Thanks, Chair. So this is the first report of the current financial year, covering the latest finance and performance information. And just before I introduce the report, I'll just point out in the main table at paragraph 20, it's incorrectly headed. So the top of page 115 in the agenda pack, it's headed 22-23 and it should be 23-24. So the report outlines a forecast overspend of 11 million, which is predominantly due to that increased continued pressures that we are seeing in social care across both adults and children's, and that's in common with most other councils in the country. We're seeing an increase both in demand and in complexity of cases. Members are of course aware that this is a national issue and not something that's unique to York, and equally you will all be aware that this is not a new issue, as reports to executive over recent years have highlighted how these pressures have been recurring and our mitigations have been one-off. The 23-24 budget setting report also highlighted a number of risks in the budget, and in particular highlighted this very risk that those pressures that were being seen in social care would continue. So this is a significant forecast overspend, and clearly we cannot continue to spend at this level, and therefore immediate action is needed to bring spending down to an affordable level, both within the current year and in future years. So the report outlines the actions that we need to take, as well as identifying some areas for further work. It's my view that these actions are essential to ensure the continued financial stability of the council. Members will be aware as well that many other councils across the country are struggling to balance their budgets. So again, this current financial challenge is not something that's unique to this council, but is something that is happening across the country. But taking action now will prevent us being in a difficult situation in future. So the summary position is outlined in table 1 at paragraph 20, and some further analysis of both finance and performance follows in the rest of the report. Just if I may just point out 2 other issues in the report. Firstly, the York Museums Trust have asked for a further extension to the letter of credit, a reduced amount that we issued in 2020 to help with their financial stability, and paragraphs 26 to 29 give a bit more detail. And secondly, it's been alluded to already at the meeting, since the changes agreed at full council in relation to that ward committee allocations, understand some members have been uncertain around the decision that was made, and therefore you have been asked to kind of reconfirm the decision that was made at full council, and that's paragraphs 30 and 31 refer. So the recommendations are set out in paragraph 8.
Thank you, Debbie. Does anybody have any questions for Debbie at all on the report? Councillor Coles.
Thank you. Sorry, I just wondered whether you could just ask, I could just ask you about the levels of spot purchasing that we've had in the budget, which I think is covered in paragraphs 47 and 48. And just anything that you can say about the measures that are being taken that hopefully will help to address some of that.
If it's all right, Chair, I've just indicated for Jamila to come back, because I think she's probably best placed to answer that question.
Thank you. Jamila Hussain, would you like to speak on that issue? Thank you.
Yeah, so we did have high levels of spot purchasing. I think, you know, there's good things and not so good things that came out of COVID, and one of the discharge to assess recommendations was to support people into care home settings, and one of the ways we did that was to spot purchase. Unlike some other areas where we block book beds, so the NHS blocked book beds, so a certain number of homes had a certain number of beds. York had a open market, so any of those beds could be used for spot purchase, and people could land anywhere in the city. Hence, you can see the high number of people going into beds, because there was always beds that were available because of no block in the system, and no real handle on assessments of those individuals once they went in. You can equally see that the cost of care rocketed at that time, and it went from an average of £800 a week for nursing care, about £850 for nursing care, up to £1,800, and similarly levels for residential care, because it became an open market and the market became very volatile. This carried on throughout COVID. We in May have now actually stopped spot purchase, because one, it's not all about money here. Doesn't give good outcomes for people. We've had an agreement with our health colleagues where we now block beds, so people who do need to be discharged from hospital, who need further assessment, are assessed in appropriate settings where they can now have full oversight of our OTs, physios, social workers, and they don't remain in those beds. Some of the spend that is highlighted by finance officer is from legacy. So because we place so many people in our homes at such high cost, we're now having to look at how we can reduce those. But once people are in residential and nursing homes, it's very difficult to reassess them back out because families got used to, the patients have got used to being there. So we are on that journey, and Debbie and I are working very closely together to say how can we consolidate that. And as Councillor Cole says, as we go forward, we've got a number of things that are coming to executive around like the provider framework, which will help stabilise the market a bit more than it is at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Pavlovic, did you indicate you'd like to speak, please, or ask a question? Thank you. Yes.
I've got
1 moment.
supplementary, if that's okay. Is it all right? I
Yes,
mean,
please go ahead.
That's a supplementary. So the spot purchasing that took place, was that because there was no other option than spot purchasing, or was that a choice that was made to get involved in, if you like, the open market and essentially we pay whatever you ask?
I can't really comment on how that decision was made. It was before my time, and I'm sure there was a decision process in that around making it more of an open market. It's unusual. If you're asking me, is it unusual to do that way? It is unusual to have an open market because it creates volatility in that. But as in terms of the decisions that were made, that's something I can't comment on.
But thank you for clarifying that it was a choice.
Thank you, Jamila, for answering that question. Councillor Eyre?
Yeah, it's just around the delayed discharges of care around that. So that decision making during COVID was specifically around getting as many people out of hospital as quickly as possible. So the key driver there was getting that out. I suspect that spot purchasing led to significant reduction in our delayed discharge of care and a massive improvement in that, which is positive. The flip side of that is the cost. Are we in the end going to expect delayed discharges of care to massively increase? In a sense, we're just basically transferring the cost back to the hospital trust.
Absolutely not. So we have, I lead on transfer of care. So the transfer of care programme, we started our home first approach in October last year, and in sort of the last place board, we took our plans for transfers of care. What we've seen since we've stopped the spot purchase is a reduction in the number of people going into residential beds. We used to have on average, and this is just residential care, which is something that I always wonder why people go into residential care where they can remain at home, has reduced between 7 and 10 people going in per month to 1 over the last 3 months. This hasn't resulted in people then delaying in care. What it's resulted in is people thinking of a different way. You know, when we talk about good and bad things about COVID, the bad thing about COVID, everybody went into a residential bed for a further assessment. This way is everybody, you know, reablement, intermediate care, community teams, rather than a bed. So you don't think about a bed first, you think about home first. And that has actually, we've actually improved our delayed discharges of care. And the hospital, I think, for a long time has been on Opal 3. It fluctuates, Opal 3 and Opal 4, where over the past 2 years, even when they had COVID, they were on Opal 4. So there is something happening where the hospital itself is also coming down in its level of escalation between 3 and 4, which is a good news, I think.
Thank you, Jamila. Does anybody else have any questions for Debbie on the report? No. I'd just like to make a comment that I think your approach and the recent move to stabilise the market and stop the spot purchasing is hugely important, because we know the pressures, the cost pressures on adult social care. It's a huge portion of our budget, and it is increasing on a monthly basis, in fact, and it is really important that we get that under control for the best benefit of the people who need to use that market, but also for the general residents and taxpayers in the city. So thank you, Jamila and Debbie, for everything you're doing on that. Would anybody else like to comment on the paper at all? Councillor Lomas?
Thank you. Oh, I think I might have damaged my microphone there, sorry. I wanted to make a few comments, and the first is that we will never apologise for sound financial management. That is what this city and this city council desperately needs. And sometimes that means that you have to make really, really tough decisions, and we are not afraid to make tough decisions. And so when Debbie came to us to talk about the difficult position we were facing and the potential overspend, we decided collectively to do whatever we could about that to ensure that City of York Council is not the next council in the national news declaring itself unable to manage financially, because although the situation is difficult, although the situation is drastic, there are things we can do, and there are things that everybody is doing. And Jamaila's given us some excellent examples of things that are being done as we speak to try to manage the overspend. But I want to be really clear about this. And the current budget that we're working under was set in February of this year. And when you set a budget with savings targets that just practically and realistically cannot be achieved, then you're going to end up with an overspend. If you don't address some of the structural problems, like the one that Jamaila's just been describing, and you don't take brave and difficult decisions around those problems, then you're going to end up with an overspend. And the message that we want to get out to the people of York is, don't panic about this. It's bad and it's difficult, but we're here and we're going to do something about it. And I think that is the important message that we want to get out. And yes, that means we're going to have to make difficult decisions, and we will make difficult decisions. But what we will do is we will do that transparently, honestly, and openly. So you'll see in this report a level of detail about all of the different things that we are doing to try and reduce the overspend before we get to it. So the overspend that's mentioned in this report is a predicted overspend, the position we'd get to at the end of the year if we changed nothing. Well, I'm very happy to say that change has happened. We have a new administration in charge, and we're going to manage the finances so that we don't end up with the overspend. And where we do have to take difficult decisions, we'll do that openly and transparently. And one of the things that I know everyone is very exercised about is the potential for charging for green waste. And I thank Denise for talking about that in her speech in public participation earlier, because it is a conversation we have to have as a city. And so rather than consider it behind closed doors, which we know for a fact that has been done in all of the years of the previous administration, in all of its forms of coalition, we know it's been discussed behind closed doors, in secret, and put off the table because they think it would lose votes. Well, we'll have those conversations openly, honestly, and transparently with people in the city. And that's why we've asked for full consideration of it in a report that will be published and will come to us to discuss, so that people can talk about it, they can ask questions, they can understand what it would really mean before any decisions are made about next year's budget. But let's be clear, this report is about this year's budget and the situation we face this year. And there are some unpalatable things in this report, but we have to face up to them and we have to do something about it before it's too late.
Thank you, Councillor Lomas, and very well said. Would anybody else like to comment on the report? Councillor Eyre?
Thank you, Chair. Welcome comments have been made so far. I think we do have to put aside rhetoric and consider reality in these situations. Last year, at this point last year, well, a month earlier, the overspend position was at £9 million, about £2 million below what it is now. We can ask questions about what the difference is, whether that's the delayed reporting or the financial management that's been going on. But this is not a new issue, and it's not a new issue that faces this council. It's faced it in Q1 every particular time. And it's a question about how you take those actions. Do you bring the underspend down, do that work around that, or do you react in a knee-jerk fashion? We closed that £9 million gap in 3 quarters during some of the worst economic times that we've had, be that the Ukraine war, be that the Liz Truss administration, the highest rate of inflation ever. We brought that £9 million down, and we didn't do it, as has been claimed, by raiding reserves. That's simply not true. £3.8 million of that was allocated was actually COVID grant that was set aside to deal with post-COVID pressures, which we used to deliver post-COVID pressures. An extra £1.9 million that was set aside to deal with more post-COVID pressures. That's 3.8 of COVID pressure reserves that were there and utilised against post-COVID pressures, and the regular £1 million contingency, the same contingency that you're using now to balance the budget, by the way. You are looking at raiding reserves, and if you look at those discussion about what reserves were raided, earmarked reserves in November 21 were 28.6 million. According to this report, they're 31 million. So earmarked reserves have increased over the last 2 years, not decreased, as is being suggested. There has been no raiding of reserves in terms of that. The general reserve is about £500,000 lower than it was in 2019, which, given all we've been through over that particular cycle with COVID, etc., to actually be able to maintain headroom in reserves and increase earmarked reserves, that is prudential financial management. There are questions about the timing of this particular report. Why was a budget amendment brought forward in June that didn't address any of this? And then 2 months later, apparently something was discovered. All of this information was in the public domain. The financial pressures for this year, the medium-term financial forecast in February showed you that there will be £17.6 million of the pressures in the next budget, of which, even assuming 3.99% council tax, would leave a £13.6 million pressure. That was known in February. I questioned the executive as to why they weren't aware of that when they came into administration and when they made unfunded promises. So what we've seen here is not dealing with things in terms of getting over the overspend, but dealing in a knee-jerk reaction, rushing through a set of cuts as early as possible to inflict as much pain on people, and bizarrely targeted at some of our most vulnerable residents. So where is that money coming from that you've chosen to take to meet this gap instead of using earmarked reserves? £150,000 set aside to deal with the cost of living crisis. You didn't produce your cost of living plan in 100 days, as you promised to Keir Starmer you would do. Now you're pulling away £150,000 of vital support for people at cost of living. Detached youth work that was going to go into Westfield Board, £150,000, gone. That vital services for young people, gone. £100,000 for substance misuse support, gone. £100,000 at a pen stroke for people with mental health and people with autism that would really deliver and lower your overspend on adult social care, gone at a pen stroke. The heroes of climate change, as Councillor Kilbane talked about, £100,000 of support for bus use, gone at a stroke, and £50,000 cuts for safe walking and safe cycling, underlying everything that you claim to be doing in terms of this administration. It's not just cruel, it's counterintuitive. As we had that discussion at agenda item 7, this is the precise level of investment, hence why it was done. It was only one-off because that's all we could do. This is a level of investment that will start to bring costs down over time. It's what will get people cycling. It's what will get people on buses. It's what will improve people's mental health, will improve autism diagnosis, give better support for people with autism, support detached youth work, and help people deal with the cost of living. That will deliver you long savings, but instead you're cutting that right now unnecessarily. And the question is, why would you do that? These cuts are politically motivated. The move is shown by the fact when you look at the environmental impacts and equalities impacts, none, not a single impact on either equality or climate change, from cutting costs to mental health, autism, youth support, cost of living, substance misuse, bus subsidies and cycling. These are motivated cuts. These are not necessary at this particular time. I urge you to reconsider taking that funding away from people who need it the most.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Webb, followed by Councillor Lomas.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose, Councillor Eyre, that you've raised some concerns there that are the results of your actions, it would appear from this report. If you look at paragraph 10, it says, the underspends and mitigations that have allowed us to balance the budget at year end have generally been one-off. I wonder, Debbie, if you could just outline in a bit more detail what are the numbers around that year on year over the last 3 or 4 years? Because of course, any reasonably responsible executive, I think, has got to look at that and think, well, if we're spending money that we're not going to have next year, and there isn't a plan to replace that money, then eventually that money will run out. And that seems to be where we're at right now. And I think to say that we can keep doing more of the same is really burying our heads in the sand. So as a result, I'm really glad that we are, as Councillor Lomas said, doing this openly and transparently and looking at what we need to do correctly to balance the budget and protect the people of York. I mean, I have responsibility for children's services, and I would not want us to get to the point where it's got to a point where we're really struggling to deliver even those services. So I think that we have to take this honestly. So Debbie, I don't know if you want to outline a bit more about what's going on in paragraph 10, if you're happy to do so.
Yeah, I can just briefly outline the last 3 years position. So in the last financial year, 2022-23, we overspent by 4.8 million, and that was funded through, as Councillor Eyre said, £1 million from the contingency, which half of that was recurring budgets, and COVID reserves of 3.8 million, which was one-off money. In 21-22, the overspend was 2.5 million, and that was funded through, again, COVID grants of 2 million and earmarked reserves of £500,000. So they were both one-off sources of income. And in 2021, there was a 1.3 million overspend, which was funded through the contingency, which was recurring, but earmarked reserves of 463,000, and the general reserve of £500,000, both of which were one-off. So it was a mixture. So it's predominantly one-off sources of money.
Thanks, Debbie.
Thank you. Councillor, Councillor Lomas.
Thank you. And thanks, Debbie, for outlining that. And I think it's important to note that those were the end of year outturns, where last year there was a 4.8 million overspend by the end of the year. So the 9 million, I think it was just a bit more than 9 million predicted at the end of the first quarter, had happily halved, but it only halved. So that's an important distinction to make, and the use of COVID reserves means that there is no further money available to us for post-COVID recovery, additional spending. And it's difficult to overstate the fact that all of those reserves, once they're gone, they're gone. And while yes, we have seen in the last couple of years an increase in earmarked reserves, they are earmarked for a purpose, and they're earmarked for a purpose that in many cases is still applicable. So if we spend them, then we won't be able to use them for the purpose they were intended for, and that leaves us in a position of either not being able to do things that the city wants us to do, or to have to borrow money in order to do them. But just a couple of points. Since we came into administration and started looking at the budget position, we've been working with officers about how we can pull something back from the budget that was set in February by the previous administration. So we've been having officers give us input on how we best balance the delivery of services that we know that residents need with the need to exhibit sound financial management. And we take the expert advice of officers when they tell us that there are some areas that we can make savings in while still delivering a reasonable level of service. And, we heard extensively from Jamila about ways that she is managing to reduce expenditure in her area by actually delivering a better, more tailored level of service. And I think we need to be really honest about the fact that some of the services that councils deliver are statutory services that we have to deliver no matter what. We can implement different ways of delivering those services that might save us some money, but we have to deliver them, and we have to respond to the demand that there is in our city for those services, no matter what. And some of the services that we deliver are non-statutory. So they are many and varied things that the council does, and we have to look at what value do they deliver Do they fit with the priorities that residents have? And for the first time in quite a number of years, we now have a majority administration. So we can confidently say that the priority that the residents in the city who voted have are the things that we put in our manifesto. And that's why the council plan that we talked about earlier is so important. And we have looked at the measures to reduce the overspend in year with the lens of the council plan, with the lens of the priorities that we have, and with each member of the city in mind. And so Councillor Eyre can mention all he likes, some of the difficult decisions that we're making, and talk about the people that will affect. And we are acutely aware of that, because we are out in the city every single day talking to people who will be affected by the decisions we're making. But we have to do our job. Somebody has to get a grip, and somebody has to make sure that we can come to the end of the year without a massive overspend, and that we can set a budget for future years that is realistic and won't result in double-figure £1 million overspends in the first quarter. So I think that's all I have to say, unless Councillor Eyre has some more points for me.
Councillor Coolbain.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, I think it is worth putting on the record so that we don't all forget that the reason that we're in this position is that we have an annual revenue budget of £140 million. Had it kept up with inflation and growth pressures from 2011, the budget would be £190 million or thereabouts annually. So we've got a £50 million hole that we're trying to cope. So we're trying to deliver services, and we're 50 million quid short of where we should be to deliver them. And of course, that austerity was introduced by the Liberal Democrats and Conservatives in 2011, and all councils across the country are now living with the consequences of those political choices.
Thank you, Councillor Coolbain. Councillor Pavlovic.
Just listening to Councillor Eyre, what we're doing is the diametric opposite of knee-jerk. You have spent year after year making knee-jerk decisions to pay off a deficit, an overspend, using reserves, knowing that those reserves weren't going to last. We are now developing a plan to set a very firm foundation, a foundation built on stone that will move the city forward, so that we don't end up having to do exactly what you've done for the past 4 years and the 4 years prior to that.
Thank you, Councillor Pavlovic. I think we need to bring this paper to a close now, but I just would like to say that I thoroughly back everything that has been said by executive members about our commitment to doing the right thing and being financially responsible in a measured way, but understanding the impact that that does have on our city. But unfortunately, at this point in time, it is unavoidable. But I would make a challenge to Councillor Eyre that I think it's time that we reignited the request to central government for a fair funding review for York to get us the money into the budgets that we have been waiting for many years. And so I'd like to ask you if you would co-sign a letter with me to the appropriate minister to get that process moving again. That's a question too. Please go ahead.
More than happy to co-sign and also indicate the work we did with the F20 group in terms of the 20 lowest funded local authorities to lobby government as part of that, and would really encourage you to engage with those as well and use it as a mechanism with significantly more weight than just ourselves being the 20 lowest funded local authorities across the country.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre. It's nice to see that you're willing to work cross-party. Marvellous. Right, can we consider the recommendations of the report then, everybody, please? They're on page 110. And the first few are to be noted. And then we move on to page 111. And the recommendation is that we approve officers to take the actions needed to manage the financial position as outlined in paragraphs 14 and 15. We approve the increase in car parking charges by 10p per hour as set out in paragraphs 81 and 82 to be implemented as soon as practicably possible. The corporate director of Place will liaise with the executive member for economy and transport to determine the exact date. We approve a further extension to March 2025 for the letter of credit to York Museums Trust as outlined in paragraphs 26 to 28. And we note the potential requirement for match funding in respect of the York Museums Trust grant bid as set out in paragraph 29. And we confirm that the officer decision around ward funding allocations is implemented as planned. See paragraphs 30 to 31. So can I see those in favour of those approvals, please? Thank you. So that's unanimous. All of those are approved. Thank you.
Back to the beginning again.
Right, everybody.
Financial year and sets out progress in delivering the capital programme. There continues to be a significant level of investment in a wide range of schemes. There is quite a bit of slippage into future years due to just reprofiling of some of the schemes. And given the council's overall financial position, as we've just discussed, there will be a review of the capital programme to ensure that all the schemes are required and that they're delivering on council priorities, and the outcome of this review will be reported back to a future meeting. There are no other issues to draw to your attention, and the recommendations are in paragraph 12.
Thank you, Debbie. Does anybody have any questions for Debbie at all? Any comments on the capital? Yeah, Councillor Pavlovic.
Just in her comments earlier about the extra money that went into housing repairs from the budget, it's all covered in page 149, if that's of any use to you.
Thank you, Councillor Pavlovic. Anybody else like to speak on this report? Councillor Eyre?
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief. I think this is probably the last capital report where the executive will be able to stand on the shoulder of giants. So I think we get to see lots of stuff in here around the Zebra funding that's been secured by the last administration, the progress on Duncan Barracks, Burnholme, York Outer Ring Road, Haxby Station, Station Gateway, and the library project, all massive capital projects you were lucky enough to inherit. I think the bigger questions for us, though, remain how your manifesto translates into this programme. So it was refreshing to hear some of the comments going forward. So there was nothing in here, and Councillor Pavlovic has mentioned a paper is coming soon to see what impact on the capital programme the 100% pledge on Burnholme and Duncan Barracks will be. Nothing here around Castle Mills and what the impact of Castle Mills will be, about 100% affordable and reduction in car parking things. So those are the key things missing from this, and we look forward to the next quarter to seeing what the impact of those decisions will have on the capital programme.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre. Councillor Lomas?
Yeah, just to reassure Councillor Eyre, and I feel like I'm repeating myself, which I possibly am, because I think I've answered this question before, that one of the things that I am doing is having a review of all capital projects, and that once that work has been completed, obviously it'll come back to executive. And I think actually Debbie also mentioned that just in her brief introduction to this paper as well. So just be reassured, Councillor Eyre, that this is something we place a very high priority on, and absolutely we are looking carefully at capital projects and their potential outputs in particular. And I just wanted to pick up on just one thing that Debbie mentioned, and that is that there has been some slippage in some of the projects, which actually is helpful to us, because at the moment the cost of borrowing would be high, and so it's fortuitous that we don't have to enter into any borrowing arrangements in this financial year, and that will certainly help us to manage the situation, and we'll be coming back at executive to talk about the capital programme in future, and hopefully Councillor Eyre will be able to share his wisdom and experience of the last 8 years at the relevant points. And as I said last time, Councillor Eyre, you're always free to talk to me at whatever point and ask any questions that you have.
Thank you, Councillor Lomas. Councillor Eyre?
Just a quick question for Debbie on that particular point. Is the rate of interest rate increasing higher or lower than inflation on major project costs? Neil might be able to. I suspect inflation on building projects is significantly higher than interest rate increases.
Neil can answer that question.
Neil Ferris is coming to the table to answer the question.
Thank you. So inflation costs for specific materials such as steel and timber have gone way above the actual cost of borrowing throughout the last few years. They're coming back down now, as you've seen in some other costs associated with the incursion in Ukraine, and we're seeing a slight reduction in the rate of growth in terms of the cost of labour as well within the construction, but it's all still running high as inflation is brought more broadly across the economy.
Thank you, Neil. Right, everybody. So I think we move to approval for this paper. It's the recommendations on page 147. I just have a question for Debbie on the first recommendation. Annex A is cited, and I believe that's on page 159, but it's not labelled as such. Can you confirm if that is Annex A? Page 159, I believe.
Yes, that's correct. Sorry. Apologies, yes.
Okay, so page 159 should be labelled Annex A. So that's what is referred to in the first bullet point. So the recommendations are recommend to full council the adjustments resulting in a decrease in the 23-24 budget of 135.903 million as detailed in the report and contained in Annex A, which is on page 159. And then to note the 23-25 revised budget and note the restated capital programme for 23-24 to 27-28 as set out. So can I see those in agreement and approval of that, please? Thank you. So that's a unanimous approval. Thank you, everybody. Debbie is back on again for item number 10, which is Treasury Management Q1 Prudential Indicators. So Debbie, can you introduce that, please? Thank you.
Thank you. So there's been a slight change in the Prudential codes that we are now required to report Treasury management activity to members on a quarterly basis. Previously, we've been able to do a strategy, a mid-year review and an outturn, but we do now have to come quarterly. This again is the first report of the year. It was considered by Audit and Governance Committee in their scrutiny role earlier this week on Tuesday. They didn't have any issues to flag to you. No new borrowing has been undertaken in the year to date, and I've no other issues to draw to your attention.
Thank you, Debbie. Would anybody like to speak at all on this? This report? No. Okay, thank you. Francis, where am I looking page-wise? 161. Thank you. Thank you. Right, so page 161. At the bottom there, paragraph 4, executive is asked to note the performance of Treasury management activity for the quarter ended 30th of June 2023, and also note the latest prudential indicators set out at Annex A. So can I see those in favour? Thank you, everybody. That's a unanimous, that paper is approved. So I have not been given any notice of any other business, any urgent business. So that brings us to the end of today's executive meeting. And thank you, everybody, for joining us and sitting along with us. You've lasted the whole period. Well done. And we will see you again next month. Thank you. Bye.